Well, hey everybody, and welcome. Welcome today to a very special inside look. So typically at this time we do Andros's Amusement Academy, and we would be building our park, but I'm a little crunched for time this week, so um, I thought we would do an inside look of Washuzan Park Rainbow Summit, which is my solo park from 2020. This was released in January of 2020. I guess. No, 2021. So this was a 2 year construction project in total on a pretty decent sized map here, and it's my favorite thing I've ever built. So I want to talk about it, and I had some requests to do sort of an inside look of the making of at one point. So that's what we're gonna do. So I'm gonna kind of jump around between a couple of different things. If you haven't seen this park before, then hopefully you'll find this pretty interesting. This whole map is sort of a culmination of a lot of the things that I've kind of learned and built on over the years in RCT as long as I've been playing. So this was a combination of a lot of the things that I liked. So obscure coasters, Japanese parks and culture, abandoned stuff, and infrastructure around the parks. So it kind of all came together as one bit here, and it also includes a number of real life kind of historical notes in here, as well as some sort of made up things. So we'll call it historical fiction, I guess. And I guess the first thing to note is that this park, which kind of has a strange name, is actually based on a real park. So the real park here is called Washuzan Park or Brazilian Park Washuzan Summit. So if we jump over here, we can see that this is actually a real park in Japan. It's located right along the inland sea here. So it's down from Okayama and just across the big bridge here from Kagawa Prefecture. There's a pretty expansive bridge here called the Seto Bridge, which actually factors into my park as well. And I wrote a whole story that went along with the park, so we're going to kind of basically roll through the story and then kind of reference the things within the park as it goes. So if we jump back into the park, you can kind of see a little bit of some hinting of some water here along the edge. That's the inland sea. And then this big start of this bridge here is the Seto Bridge as well. And then the park is situated in relatively the same spot with relatively the same stuff. So it's all kind of based on similar things like that. So I did a very complex README, I suppose, for this. Let's see if we can go into read mode here. And thank you for Josh for doing this logo for me, which turned out absolutely beautiful. Actually, is similar to the real one. So we pulled the real logo off of Brazilian Park and turned it into this one. So as far as story goes, there was a pretty substantial narrative here, which I'm not going to go through entirely, but I am going to hit the highlights for it if you're interested. So the name of the whole park is Rainbow Summit. Where did that come from? Is kind of summed up here in the first paragraph here. So this is the town of Shimatsui, which is in real life is actually what this area is as well. And it's a fishing town, kind of a small, sleepy town, fishing oysters and fertile land for crops, which to be fair, is a lot of Japan. And Mount Washuzan is where the park is built on top of, and brings hikers and just outdoorsmen to this area. But as the sun rose over top of the water in the inland sea, visitors would say that the area sparkled like a rainbow, which is where we got the name of our park, Rainbow Summit. So our story for this park starts in 1971 with a gentleman named Masayo Tadaka, and he opened a small entertainment center on top of the mountain. And that is right here. So, hey Fred, welcome. So this kind of summit area here is where I see as the original park the park construction. So very top of the mountain, accessed by a very long and winding little hairpin filled route up to our parking lot here with this little entrance up here, very 1970s look, and then had 3 rides. So there was a small Ferris wheel, there was an observation tower here called the View Tower, this guy, and then there was the pedal cycle monorail. So this is called Sky Cycle. This is a Togo pedal monorail, and this is based on the real life one. So it's actually in the real park. If we go back to the base here, you can actually see it right here. It's this sort of long and narrow bit right here. And this does do sort of the same thing as the real one. Let's drop our street view in here so you can see. It's a pedal monorail, which thank you to Space Cave for the vehicles for this. But it actually does go out over top of pretty sizable drop off here, and there's a pretty great view of this spectacular bridge all the way through. So this is, per our story, kind of where this park started, with these couple of little locations, and then the park kind of grew from there. But yeah, the view is incredible. The ride itself is somewhat terrifying. There's a little seatbelt, and it's very easy to get out of it if you really wanted to. And there's really no catwalk or anything like that, so you better hope that the chain makes it and everything else to get yourself around the whole thing. Because it is a pretty hairy approach as far as just going out over top of this space. So the park continued along and was started with that, and my character here, Tanaka, kind of spent years developing this up, and he was also a part of the shipping industry in this area, since shipping was a major feature back and forth from Okayama, which is the main city there, and then also Kagawa across the way. Before the Seto Bridge was built, there was really no way to get across to the other prefecture except for ferry traffic. So that will kind of play in a little bit later. But as the park grew, they added the first of the coasters, which was the jet coaster. So here is that one right here. So this is Jet Coaster Super Train, which originally opened as just the jet coaster. So we have our little station here, and certainly looked a little nicer when it was first built, I'm sure. We have our operator here. So this is Operator Haruki, which we've frozen operators on every one of the different locations, and they all have appropriate names for the area. So it's not just a Japanese name that I kind of picked out of a hat. All the names for the characters in my story, and all the names for the people that are placed around the park, are all prefecture appropriate names and appropriate for the decade of the age of the person. So I was pulling a lot of names from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and more appropriate. There's thankfully some really great naming websites out there showing kind of what was popular in those regions during the time. So that helped immensely for that kind of thing. I was able to use the monorail track underneath of the water coaster track here to give this a little bit of a thicker spine, which is sort of what I wanted. So it's a Japanese built coaster. I've discolored some of the rails in the thing, and as we'll see in the story, the park gets a little bit worse for wear as time goes on. You can see at some of the locations, they're definitely worn down a little bit here at some of the higher stress locations, but the coaster itself doesn't do a whole heck of a lot. It's very much in the Japanese jet coaster style, where it's got low hills, flat corners, things like that, and a single train with an ungodly slow lift hill, which is pretty standard for Japanese type stuff. So the park continued to get to build up and get larger. So there was the jet coaster, and then there was a bungee jump, which we'll look at in a second. And with the 5 major attractions is when it finally came together and was named Rainbow Summit. Now, this timeline that I put together doesn't necessarily relate to how I built the park. So I kind of built the park with an overall master plan in mind, with an idea of more or less how everything was situated within the space, but I certainly didn't build this in chronological order. It would have been a good way to do it as far as that goes, but I did try and make sure that it made sense to be built in a certain way, as that would be. So at the time, our character here, Tanaka, ended up opening a ferry business with another character here, Unishi, who opened up a flow of kind of day trippers from Kagawa Prefecture across the way, since of course the bridge still wasn't built. And in the 70s, we added a couple of different things. So we added an Irely Rolo plane and a second roller coaster, which we'll check out here. So first of all, the Rolo plane is actually back here. So in our view of the park here, it's actually abandoned. It's kind of set up over here. Very hard to spot in real life. Actually, I visited the park and was all around here and never ended up seeing this. And I only kind of discovered it later when I was on Google Street View walking around. Here is the bungee tower that we had talked about in the story earlier, with a staircase up to the top, and then you jump off the ends, bounce up and down, and then you get lowered into the big inflatable pad there. But we've got those couple of rides. If we jump back over to Google Street View, we're jumping around all over today. You can actually see the ride. So the Rolo plane actually has Street View access to it right here, behind our coaster. So I rode this coaster a good, I don't know, 6 or 7 times, and never noticed that the Rolo plane was up there. And you can kind of see why. It's very hidden as far as the space goes. And you can see the rust and everything. So this was the state of the park when I visited. This one says image capture was 2015, which was a couple years before my visit in 2017. Thankfully, as you can see from the image that we were looking at on Google Earth here, the coaster has since been repainted a very bright pink, and it's actually gotten some nice love here, which is good. But if you remember that station also with the structure as it is, you can kind of see we've more or less copied that station over, trying to copy the same overall look for the thing. So the two trains are very different on the ride. Actually, the trains are there's one stand-up train and one backward sit-down train on the two, which is kind of interesting, and we'll get to that in a minute when we put that coaster in as far as our timeline goes. The Mad Mouse, that was the other thing I wanted to look at. So over here you can see a kind of walkway viewing platform up here, and you can see some old pieces of a coaster down below called Mad Mouse. So as we're currently viewing the park, the Mad Mouse has since been removed, and now we have a walkway with a viewing window. So I guess these little guys here are meant to be those binoculars, like the post-mounted binoculars. So the idea was that they reused the structure of the coaster itself and turned it into a viewing platform that you could walk on later on. And actually, I can show you where that came from. So there's a park called Amano Hashidate Viewland. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Amano Hashidate Viewland. Yeah, so heck of a view, as it proclaims. And here's a Mad Mouse type coaster, which closed in somewhere between 2004 to 2012. And what's cool about this one is they actually did what we're doing here, and this is where I got my idea for it. So if we do a little street view here, hopefully we can get up on top maybe. Yeah. So you can see the track of the coaster, or the coaster supports and everything. Well, good afternoon, Hydroportal. Welcome. So we can see the old spine of the track here that got a nice walkway on it, and a viewing platform, and just kind of an overlook out to the ocean and the great views. So that's what we did on ours here, and so this is where that idea came from. I thought this was kind of clever. I mean, certainly sad to lose a coaster, but Kind of an interesting reuse of a space. And in my story, when the ride closed, being that it was up on top of the mountain, it was going to be a very expensive project to haul everything down and demolish the whole thing off the mountaintop. So instead, they left it there and built this walkway. So now's where the point where my story takes a turn for the sad. So in 1980, the ferry that our park owners, Tanaka and Unishi, owned, Unishi had the primary ownership of the company, crashed it struck ground on one of the islands in the inland sea and sunk. And Tragedy ended up impacting the park in that now the owner was kind of tied to a safety tragedy, and in Japan they take safety very seriously, and tragedies are investigated and sometimes take a very long time to rebound from it, especially in the theme park industry. So the idea is that this sinking of our little ship here caused the first downturn of the park because the owner was tied to this ferry company, and thought was, well, the ferry company's not safe, well, maybe the park isn't. And ultimately, it ended up with the park kind of having its first big downturn, which what I wanted to show as I was building this park was that there was kind of growth and downturn through the whole thing. So if we look down here, there's actually, this is meant to be a little monument to the sunken ferry here, and the sort of an omen here. We have the Tanaka family boat, which has been sunk, that's stuck here in the corner. If you click on all these, it's all the different characters with that we'll have. There's the Sato family boat, there's Fujiwara, there's the Yamamoto, and then just these cruise boats as well. So all of these have particular names and particular themes for each of the different groups. So in trying to save face, the park ended up building a Intamin first generation drop tower here, which ultimately would have its own tragedy later on as the cable would snap and the vehicle would come crashing down the drop chute and injure 3 people. Which is based on an actual event that happened in Six Flags Great America back in 1984. So in our story, it happens here instead, which that closed down this ride for some period of time during our early story. Hey Bear, welcome. Thanks for coming by. We're looking at Brazilian Park. Yeah, Hydra, you gonna include that in your thing? So that's the one of the reasons that the park continued on its decline. Now there was the tragedy of the ferry kind of spurred the development of the proposals to build a bridge across from the mainland over to Kagawa Prefecture, and this is kind of where the story merges into the real life, where around this time the same considerations happened and the environmental studies happened and the bridge got a green light to move forward, kind of hurting a lot of the ferry industries and damaging a lot of the small towns in the area that were really focused on that sort of economy. But as the bridge was getting built, this was one of the biggest bridges in the world, one of the longest spans at the time. This was 1982, and the idea was, or the thought was, that potentially this bridge is going to bring tourists to the region. So, with that in mind, we have our first of our hotels, which is right here, and this hotel was built by Makoto Inoue in our story, and he not only built this hotel and spa, but he also opened up a small little theme park right here in competition to Rainbow Summit, which had a bunch of little kids rides and eventually would have this track safari ride and a couple of other things kind of in the region. Now Rainbow Summit did try and partner with this park, but ultimately they did have some competition going back and forth for the whole thing. So with the accident that happened on the drop tower here, that was kind of the nail in the coffin for the park itself. And the park closed in 1987 and was put up for sale. And then the Tanakas went back and ended up running a shipping business. So the shipping business, actually, if we go down here, let's find that. Where are we? There's actually a couple of different track rides throughout here. Traffic. For some reason I don't see my shipping. So there's a. I'm trying to spot it. I don't know if I just don't have the right file or what, but there's a number of different tracked vehicles that go around, including the Shimetsui emergency services, which come and go from the fire station right here. There's also a vehicle that does errands that goes around, and then there's also a delivery van that goes around and does a lot of different bits. Let me see here. It would have been Tanaka Deliveries. Which may have gotten stuck, to be honest. Mini coaster. Okay, so we had pedal mode. Let's look at vehicles from different track types. And I'm trying to remember which of the Space K rides, which thankfully Space K had so many different vehicles. I want to say it was the key van. Go. So the vehicle here ends up stopping at 6 different delivery points around the area and kind of pulling in. It also stops for gas at the gas station here, but we have Tanaka Deliveries here, which is the Yamamoto Fisheries building, but then behind it we have this delivery area as well. And the delivery van stops at a couple of different spots here, at some of the restaurants, at the Lawson grocery store here, and then also at the 7-Eleven over here, and kind of does its thing throughout. So you can see, I'm going to hear it. Oh, there it is. And it stops at each of the different locations. Now, one of the challenges was trying to get it to all these different roads to not merge, so we have some pretty complex routing patterns for a lot of this stuff, just to make sure that it didn't merge on top of itself. Yeah, so there are brakes and accelerators before each of the turns and everything, so that it will look like the vehicle is actually braking to slow down for the corner and then turning into the actual corner. So here it'll come and park here momentarily. Now each one of these is a station, and this was before the advent of the new save format, so you could only have 5 stations, which meant that I only had 5 stops. My original intention was to have a lot more stops, but the vehicle is set for a dispatch time of 90 seconds, so that each one of the stops, it'll look like there's actually a delivery happening where it stopped for a full 90 seconds before it goes off and does its next thing. So that was part of trying to keep it at least somewhat interesting. So we have the Shibutsu Benria down here, which is a lumber yard, and then we have all of the crops and things like that here, which are based on crops that grew in this region in this time of year for this area. So that's why this field is barren. That's why, you know, this field is just kind of coming in, and then we have our trees here as well to try and to base all that off of the real thing. A couple of further characters here. So here we have Masayo Tanaka, who is our original park owner, visiting Unishi's grave here after he passed away. And then the story goes that after Tanaka had to give up the park because of all of the accidents and things like that, that eventually, when the park reopened and got on its feet again, there was enough kind of goodwill behind the effort that Tanaka had put together to actually build this park in the first place that they negotiated a little shrine to be built in Tanaka's name. So here is Yuri Tanaka, who is the son, visiting Tanaka's little shrine here within the park, overlooking the ocean. So in our story, when the bridge opens, the fanfare does bring all of the tourists through here, and one of the biggest growth moments here is the Hotel La Rainbow, which is a partnership between a Spanish investor and a local gentleman named Sato, who runs tea shops. And actually this blue building down here is Sato's tea shop, which you can see if you click on the different ones. So in conjunction with our storyline here, all of the buildings here have different clickable things in a lot of cases where you can see who lived where. So this is the Sato household here right behind the tea shop, and then there's the Onishi household, and then there's just a bunch of other things. Some of them are not really part of our story here, like the Kazumi Hobby Shop, but a lot of them are different different parts and pieces that play into the story in some place. What I wanted to do was that if somebody just wants to view this park for the park, then great, they can do that. But if somebody really wants to get into it and read the story and go find all these sort of hidden things, then there's a lot more opportunity to go do those things. So the Hotel La Rainbow was built with a pretty gigantic observation viewing tower. And when it was built, it was the tallest in the world, 150 meters tall, with this really kind of wide viewing capsule, and all these different rooms that viewed out over top of the water and over top of the bridge. So really banking on the bridge being this kind of big tourism spot. Which for a little while it was. So we had a new owner who would take over for the park, and his name was Kiyoshi Miyake, and he was an investor from the north, from Tokyo, and he had made business connections with a number of the expos around Japan, and notably the Tohoku exhibition of 1985, in which case they were able to acquire this Starjet. So in Japan, one of the ways that coaster history developed over there in real life is a lot of the exhibitions that Japan had. So there was the Tohoku exhibition and a number of other festivals and things like that would often have rides with them. And when the rides were done after the 1 or 2 year run, they would then go to a park. So a park would pick them up secondhand and rebuild them in the location. And that's what happened with the real park for this coaster that we were looking at earlier. And that's what happened here in our park as well, where Miyake was able to negotiate a deal to get Starjet. And like we were saying earlier, this has 2 different trains. It's got a stand-up train, and it's also got a backward sit-down train. So the real ride has the same thing, and actually the backward sit-down train runs for most of the day, and then from 1:30 to 3:30 they run the stand-up train, which is kind of interesting. When I went, unfortunately, the stand-up train wasn't available. It must have been off getting annuals done somewhere else. But The story behind this, at the same time from this Tohoku exhibition, we also picked up the Condor ride here, as well as this Teacups ride. So this is Dizzy Cups, and then this is just the Condor. So very kind of simple names throughout, but really seeing the boon of the bridge tourism really started to build up the whole park. Now, one of the interesting things with this ride is that it's built for flat surface. And this is sort of a standard Togo layout. And this park, and same thing in real life, doesn't really have a whole lot of flat area. So they built up with some retaining walls on the one side. They built up some footers on the other side, which you can kind of see here, in order to make this work and make this fit. And actually, we can see this in the real one. If we go here, we can actually see the supports for the ride are built up on this kind of concrete block through the space. So this is one of the first areas that I worked on this park, kind of building up these different ones. And then this is where I had Che from the community kindly built me some steeper B&M supports. So that's where those objects came from. And one of the fun things, or the interesting things to me that I found on this ride while we were here, is the supports were adjusted. So we have this nice walkway, which is quite a bit taller than a lot of these other supports. So they had to be basically cut and put back together for the base plate. And actually, you can see it right here, this weld right here and here. And you can see it there and there. So all of these columns here were cut and shortened up to actually bolt to a concrete footer that was up higher than all the other ones. So really, to get it to fit into the space, they had to do all sorts of clever stuff. That was kind of interesting. And you can see this tower off in the distance, and we'll get to this in a little bit. That is the real-life Hotel La Rainbow, which we'll see what happens to that here in just a bit. All right, so continuing along, the idea became at one point, once the new owners took over, that they realized that this driveway all the way up to the park, this very difficult to get to, hairpin corners, tight quarters parking lot was maybe a little bit difficult to get to. So they ended up building a new entrance down here, lower, right by the main road. So this is Route 590 or 393, and this ended up being the new entrance to the park. And in homage to the original park, they have the rainbow motif kind of carried through into the plaza down here, and then also into the canopy. So with the opening of the bridge in 1989 and the larger kind of tourist boom that the area had seen, the park really thrived. So they added a number of rides, including the Ultra Twister, which we can see over here. And this was something that Space K helped me out as far as hacking goes. We've got a custom ride vehicle here that's got basically a powered car kind of elsewhere, and that's sort of running the whole thing. And it operates in shuttle mode, where we kind of bounce back and forth between the two things. So as far as I know, this is the most realistic Ultra Twister that the game has done, or the game has seen so far, which is sort of my goal. So Space K was a big part of that. So thank you to him for making that happen. And then I just themed it. But we have the brakes, and then bounce back, our tilt track, dropping down to the rolls here at the bottom. So one of this sort of very kind of simple but modern sort of station. We have the big columns with the steel structure, and then just the flat roof on top. Starting to get a little discolored here, but at the time it would have been a little more pristine. But not too bad. Oh yeah, the coaster still, even with the powered vehicle, it looks like it moves pretty naturally through the whole thing. And then really it's just a whole mess of just stuff merged together. So we've got the air-powered launch coaster track here with the curve up on top, and that's the vertical lift. Just trying to make the whole thing look as accurate as we can. But the really big win for the park, and kind of the last major big deal, was the big coaster here, Titan Max. So if you're familiar with coasters, you may recognize the layout more or less. as the Arrow coaster from Space World in Japan, which is in southern Japan, which is now closed, unfortunately. The only difference is that it's mirrored, so this section here would happen on the other side, and the station and everything are a little bit higher up. They end on top of the hill here. So our storyline goes that at the time, Space World was having a little bit of struggles, and they were not able to make the next payment to Aerodynamics for the ride that they had already designed and was partially in fabrication. So picking up that ride at a discount was our Rainbow Summit here, and they were able to buy the park, or buy the coaster, adjust certain footer heights and footer placements for support columns, and mirror the layout to better fit their space. And they got this really big ride, kind of signature elements here with minimal investment. So this is our main attraction, and this one came in conjunction with that main entrance. So you have really this heck of a great view as you walk into the space, and then you see this big coaster here right behind the whole thing. Now, the real park doesn't have this. Obviously, Space World did indeed get Titan at the time, but I thought maybe our alternate universe park would be a little bit different, and they would get this park. And this sort of goes back to my original want to build a Space World park, which is where I had originally gone with this concept, is that I kind of wanted to build a park like Space World in Japan, and instead I built this one because this one seemed more interesting, but I wanted a more signature coaster for the overall space. And this kind of super awkward curving helix thing, it was just as awkward in real life. It hurt a lot, but the coaster was interesting and unique, and kind of was made pretty interesting as far as the whole thing goes. So those were all the different expansions and everything else. They expanded with a big new Ferris wheel up top. So the original Ferris wheel, the Rainbow Wheel, actually ended up going to our boneyard here, which you can see it here as Rainbow Wheel. And there's a couple other older history type things. We've got the defunct chairlift cars down here as well, and then also some tubes from our lazy river, which we'll hear about in just a little bit. But as our storyline continues, we get to the point where the tourism was slowly starting to wane off, and look to transition back to go back towards more local traffic. So you really weren't getting that same amount of tourism. So the park was able to have one more kind of major install, and added the space shot up top here, the SNS space shot. And one of the oddball things on this, and this is based on a real life thing. So we've got our operator here, which I said earlier is names are based on names in the regions. We have Operator Takuma, and we have Brickson. And Brickson, which is this little red brick here that's sitting on the button, is one of my favorite things from my visit to the park. This is a secondary operator button that operates this ride. So you have an operator here, and you have somebody who checks out here, and then this is a button that acknowledges the ride is ready to go. Now, at Space World, in real life, this is operated by a brick that is literally put on top of the button by the one operator who runs the whole thing. Not something that I would recommend in general, but it is indeed something that happens, and is a little bit scary, perhaps. But Brickson is what I dubbed him when we were there, and it was a good time. Trying to see if the Google Earth has a shot of him. But Brickson is indeed innocent. He is the hardest working member of the crew. So let's move over. So you can see this is the real turbo drop next to the observation tower, next to the jet coaster station. We did ride this. It was a little terrifying. There were not very many coasters open when we rode, or when we visited. So this coaster was closed when I was there. The Ultra Coaster was closed, and the stand-up train was gone from the ride. So sadly, that's it. But yeah, unfortunately, the button is over here somewhere. But yeah, so Brickson is making an appearance in the park because he had to. That was one of those things that I felt like I had to include. But again, pretty incredible view through the whole thing, and really kind of worth. It is on my photos website, so I'm sure we'll find some other little details there at some point. But in order to focus more on the locals, the park built an aquatic center, which these are real popular in Japan. So a couple of water slides, a big pool, and a little lazy river. So we have kind of that on the side. So I have 3 different water slides here. So we have the medium slide, we've got the big slide, and then we have the small slide, both of which were pretty darn popular. Tried to make the slowdown here a little bit less abrupt, which you can kind of see it loses a little something when they get up and then walk on the water off, but nonetheless, it's still okay. Got our changing rooms here, got the gift shop, a little bit of filtration stuff behind. We also have the ability for those guests to actually come down here and wade into the river themselves. So that was a little bit of a feature there as well. Now, as the tourism bubble was starting to burst, the owner Inoue here, who remember we said owned this little kind of area of rides with the safari ride, then also some other kids rides. He sold, and he ended up selling to our park here. Miyake was able to pick this area up and expand. So we closed the safari ride and moved the kids rides up top here, which we see up here as our sort of spinning rides here. So we have the Yamaha motorbikes, and then here's Fun Toys ride. And we also have the coin-operated motorcycle here that bucks back and forth in one space. And actually, the motorbikes, or not motorbikes, but the Yamaha sponsorship is based out of this Yamaha building down here, which is actually a building that exists in the real town of Shimotsui. So I thought that would be a kind of nice tie-in for the whole thing. And more advertisements went up. You can see here a billboard for the park. So that's the park's logo with the red, the yellow, and the purple stripe. We can see that here hanging up above. Picture it as a rainbow. In my opinion, maybe not as cool as the original park logo, which was just a rainbow on a stick, but still kind of interesting. So we've got our tourism declining, which is not a great thing for the park, especially at this size, and we have a number of the buildings starting to fall afoul of lack of tourism. And one of the first ones to go was Hotel La Rainbow, and this is definitely based off the real life history of this hotel, which did not have a lot of rooms and charged a very lot for those rooms comparatively to stuff in the region. Like I said before at the beginning, this is a fishing village and there's not a whole lot of stuff to do. So this hotel was purely based on the hope that this bridge is going to generate all sorts of tourism forever, which of course it was never going to do, but it did for a little while. So the hotel closed the observation tower, kind of leaving the capsule at halfway, so we have it leveled between the counterweight and the capsule. And then the hotel itself stayed in operation for a number of years before finally shutting down. And this is the state of the hotel today. We can see some of this. Let me see how close we can get on Street View. So here is the hotel today. You can see the tower, which is all rusted up the whole way top. And it does have this really cool, gigantic tower or capsule as well, but the whole thing is overgrown. Many of the windows are broken. There's trash everywhere. So that was what I wanted to show off. And in front of the entrance, they erected these really big concrete barricades, so you can't get a vehicle in there. Which, we go take a look at our park. Let's see, we've got the concrete barriers here. We've got the old vehicles here, the Rainbow courtesy vans, with that kind of nice dark green. And then we have broken windows here. We've got all sorts of stuff. And then our security guard characters here. We have Urban Explorer Brian and Urban Explorer Matt here. So these two guys are named for my favorite urban exploration YouTube channel, which is The Proper People. They do some pretty cool videos, so I thought it would be a nice little Easter egg to toss those guys in here as well. So they are in there at the moment. So we've gotten to this point here where we're in kind of the early 2000s and things are starting to go down. But the big kind of nail in the coffin for a lot of things, and for this park in general, was the Fujin Raijin 2 accident at Expo Land Park in Osaka on May 5th of 2007, which derailed and killed one rider. And this was a real-life incident that happened at Expo Land Park and ultimately led to the closure of Expo Land. And the resulting uh, inspections and governmental regulations and requirements for inspection ended up killing off a bunch of the smaller parks around Japan, which either couldn't afford the inspections for one, or couldn't afford the repairs required in the inspection for cables and lifts and things like that, and just steel inspections. So in our story, that's how a lot of this park started to decline. So we lost the cable car here, and we can see that there is one chairlift car still here, just kind of hanging out. The rest of them are in the boneyard. We lost the drop tower again. The observation tower goes away. Eventually, the bungee tower would close as well. We've got and then a few of the other just different rides, like the Lupo plane here, or the Rolo plane, and then also the safari ride as well. And this was a really bad news in general for Japan, this accident, because a lot of small parks closed, and it really set back the industry as a whole for a number of years. Yeah, maybe so. Um, so that sort of ended up with the low point, as the different parks were, or the park was really starting to uh, was really starting to come apart and kind of lose interest and lose just overall popularity within the community. So while the park tried to do what they can, it didn't quite work out. But there was a slow positivity that was happening, and really this park is based right around this time. So it was set kind of in the early 2020s and late 2019, kind of based on my park visit, where everything was rusted, was looking really poor, but was starting to get better. So when I started this park, they had not begun painting this coaster yet in real life into the pink that it is now. And they did partway through, and I was originally planning to just build a rundown park, and that was about it. But when that happened, I started to look at it and thought, well, maybe there is some positivity in this after all, and maybe the park is starting to turn the corner, and we can see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. And that's kind of where we left it. So we see our coaster here getting painted. There's the first coaster paint in quite a while. So here's Painter Osamu, who is working on the structure here while the ride is running. Maybe not the best choice, but we're getting this kind of striking purple and red scheme. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go with the super bright pink that the real one did, but I thought that could be something here. And also, one of the other features that I have in the story was that the popularity of the park started to come back because of the Sky Cycle. The original park attraction from the 1970s started to pop up on Facebook and travel blogs and all sorts of things like that. And true enough, if you spend enough time on Facebook or wherever, and some of the roller coaster pages or just the travel blogs, you'll see this come up as like, can't believe this crazy roller coaster, which obviously not a roller coaster, but still sort of interesting. But as the park started to come out of its out of the downturn, we have the coaster getting painted there. We got a new train for the jet coaster, which got renamed into Jet Coaster Super Train. So I do have a little bit in the story where one of the local kids was able to, or there was an ask for the kids to put submissions in for designs, and this kid won his design with the red, orange, yellow, and blue train here on black. What was his name? Any details? But And then our story ends as the Kiyoshi Miyake, who was the owner of the park, was able to pass along the interest to his son, Kazuya Miyake, and released a 5-year plan for growth and development in the park and get it to kind of a new spot. Now, granted, real life COVID is not helping things, so it's it's definitely been a trouble as far as that goes for them. But that's the story of the park, and that's really where this whole thing came together. Obviously, I kind of skimmed things as far as that goes, so I'd recommend, if you did find it reasonably interesting, actually read the story. There's a lot more detail to it, and I feel like I wrote it a lot better than I can speak it. So that was where a lot of this came from. Now, as far as some of the other just little fun additions and things, we've got our train here in the middle. So this is the Shumatsu Electric Railway, and this is a real-life railway that is no longer here. So going back to the city here, we've got somewhere. Where am I? There we go. So the railway was abandoned a number of years ago, but a lot of the tracks still remain, and the cars are really beautiful. These nice kind of red and tan cars. So in our storyline, the ride still exists and still is cruising along here. We've got a lot of these fishing boats and fishing vessels here, all named kind of oyster boats and things like that. There's some characters on here, just something to click on. In a lot of cases, it's just kind of clickable stuff. Up here, we have the Gion Shrine, and this is based off of a real shrine in the area as well. So I wanted to have some level of interesting kind of Japanese shrine. Can't necessarily get to the detail level of the real thing, but I wanted to at least try a little bit. We also have another shrine here with a torii gate up to this bell. Up here we have a little hand washing area, which is very important as far as the Shinto type shrines go. Now in the village here, we've got the Lawson, like I said earlier. There's another convenience store here and a 7-Eleven over here. Now a lot of these were based off of real things, and if we go through the README after the story, up there, here, you can actually see how these compare. So all of these buildings, literally every single building in the map, is based off of a building within 5 miles of the park. So we see our 7-Eleven here coming across. We see the shop here. So this shop is called the Yamazaki Mart, and the Yamazaki family is scattered throughout our park as well. And then there's the Lawson here, which Lawson's basically another 7-Eleven, very popular convenience store in Japan. Here's our hobby shop. Here's the tea house. This is Sato's tea house. A number of warehouse type buildings and tea houses, things like that. This is the fire station here, which I thought was kind of interesting. There's our hotel. This is the first hotel. Here's the Hotel Rainbow. And then I really loved these cemeteries in the area. They're really compact, just absolute ocean of stones. And so I tried to replicate that. At the time I was fighting the object limit, and I still did hit the object limit at some point. But I at least tried to save things a little bit and build things here and there. That would work. So I found that all of these made sense to pull from existing resources as far as just images go and things like that. And I could go on and on. There's quite a few of the different bits here, but as far as other realistic details go, there's underneath of the coastline here the whole way, there's a rapids ride that just runs up and down the whole darn thing, and or actually it's a water slide. Here we can kind of see the water slide here, which gives you water sound, so it sounds like the ocean lapping up against the edge of the coastline. All of the cars in the area were colored based on percentages of colors of cars that are sold in the region, which surprisingly that's a statistic that exists on the internet, which I guess everything exists on the internet. But I was able to find out that the largest percentage of cars in Japan are white, followed by gray, then black, then colors, and the colors are in like the less than 10% type range. So very interesting as far as that goes, but that's why all the cars are here. Here's another one of the details. So this is Nakamura headed to work. So it's got a long time here. So this is one of those things you just kind of have to catch as it goes along. But it looks like he may be stuck actually. Comes from down here and pulls out and drives up the little side street here and parks, and then it'll sit there for a while, then it'll back out and he'll come on back down and then go there. We've got the bus routes throughout the whole space, and then our main vehicles here. We do have the faster lane on the inside, and then our train station as well has the main train here. So this is the Limited Express, which is the real train that would be going out there across the bridge and out. This bridge and highway bridge doesn't exist in real life with this great waterfall. I kind of wish it did. This area over here is really where the town of Shimatsui is. And my original goal was to actually build the town, so to go over the mountaintop here and then build a number of the town elements here, have the train station, have everything like that. But it's ran out of object space. Now with the object limit, of course, I could go back, but maybe not something I'm looking to do. The coaster here that we ended up making into a walkway did actually have a layout, and I built the full layout. I supported the whole thing, and I had it operating for a while before I decided to close it down and do something different. It was a little sad to see it go as far as just another attraction in the park, but I felt like it made more sense to the park storyline to have it closed and have this in place. I also thought it was kind of a cool feature for the that walkway in the real park in Japan, so I thought that could be a nice nod to the real thing. There was a landslide in the story, which I forgot to mention earlier, and here is that landslide. You can see the cones kind of set up on either side, but it doesn't stop some people. So we have Kaisuke here, who's waiting for Akari in his car, and of course we can find Akari, who is over here polishing up his vehicle here, getting ready to go meet his friend to do some drifting. So it doesn't really have any kind of bearing on the storyline. I just thought it would be kind of a nice feature to add in as far as the overall base goes. We've got the Satoshi Kon-san farm up here as well, and just a bunch of those little details kind of through the whole thing. Different stores, so corner shop and things like that. One of the challenges that I ran into was the underground system here. So you can see that the train here, once it exits the visible part, goes underneath and actually goes up to an invisible station up here. So what I wanted to do is get guests down into the village without bringing too many guests down into the village. So I didn't want it to feel like it was super crowded. So this pathway of guests just kind of streaming through here is sort of not what I really wanted, especially when I'm saying that the town is a sleepy fishing town that really doesn't have a whole lot of visitors. So the only way to get down here is by taking the train, and the train stops here and just here. So this is really where a lot of our guests come from. And then to get out, they can either take the train back if they want to, or there's an underground network of paths down here, which you can kind of see here as I make it all invisible, that are all one-way paths that go up to the park itself. So that way we can limit the amount of people that are down here in the village space while still not hindering the amount of people that are up here. Ideally, I'd have less guests overall, but it's a little harder to control that as far as the overall stuff goes. But we can see here there's the third train for Titan Max. So this one has become a parts train. There was a comment on the story that I forgot to mention that the lazy river closed because they were seeing cracks that were undermining Route 393 here, and that was filled in with some crack injection and epoxy repair. That's what these little pieces are here. But the ride remains drained. You can see all the different cracks in the bottom of the pool, and then all the just water and everything throughout. Here is the tubes for it as well. One of the other features here is our enthusiast who's trespassing through this gate to get some pictures, and the Subaru Legacy, which is an inside joke from when I visited Japan. We had a Subaru Legacy. Was the rental vehicle that we had, and one of my friends left his GoPro in the vehicle. And we found this out a couple of days later when we were halfway along the other side of the country. And so we called the rental place. And they didn't speak great English, but we said, hey, we left a camera here. We need to find it. And they asked, what kind of vehicle was it? So, oh, it's a Subaru Legacy. And they said, no, we don't understand what that is. And instead of Subaru Legacy, and they couldn't understand it. And finally, my friend was just frustrated, and he says, a Subaru Legacy with an R, like since Japanese people have a hard time pronouncing the L's. And the guy on the rental car agency immediately goes, oh, a Subaru Legacy. Oh yeah, okay, we have that car. Let us go look. And they were able to find the camera. So it was sort of one of those funny moments that was great customer service in the end. So that's why that is named as it is. There's a couple other just different inspectors, trucks, and the water retention things up here. I'm trying to think of some of the other different pieces that we have. Here's one of our performers. Thanks to Space Cave for a number of the vehicles. So we did the pedal cycle monorail here for the Togo train, or the Togo ride there. We have the swings, which were put together initially for this park. We've also got the little bullet train here as well, which was another one. And then I think there were some other just vehicles in general. We also have the here they are. Where is it? The ride-on vehicles, which is a big thing in Japan. They're just out in the pathway. Just guests can get on and ride them wherever they want. So this is a rideable thing here. It just kind of intersects with all the guests. And you can see there's one vehicle going. I kind of wish I would have put more in, but just the one. At our queue here, we've got a maze, or actually no, it's a miniature golf that the guests. So it looks like they're waiting in line, then they get their ticket, head on in, and then exit out the other side for that one. As far as other rides go, I initially was looking at building a safari ride up top here, so that was sitting here before I put the Mad Mouse in place. There was a couple other coasters that I was looking at some point or another, but really never ended up coming to fruition as far as all that goes. But really, the whole park was a lot of fun to build, and it was one of the easiest builds I've had. I find that in a lot of cases, once I get through what I consider the fun stuff, which is rides and coasters and things like that, it sometimes becomes really hard to actually continue along as far as placemaking and building architecture and things like that. And honestly, this park went together well easier than pretty much every other park that I've been to. And just all sorts of little kind of fun stuff. This here is the knitting cafe, Fuko and Marukich, which is a real life thing. And here's knitting enthusiast Miyuki, who's going into the cafe. So the cafe is based off of a real place, and it is a knitting cafe. I'm not quite sure what that is, but from my travels in Japan, I had a really kind of great experience there, and just kind of enjoyed my time, and really wanted to see if I could build that feeling and the culture and just the overall vibe of the whole thing here. I think one of the biggest criticisms I got of the park when it opened was that the foliage wasn't very good, and I absolutely agree. The foliage is terrible. The biggest issue, I think, or offender is, I think, these rhododendron trees. which I liked them initially because they were full and kind of took up a lot of space and really kind of heavily textured, but the problem is they stand out. And I went through so many different colorations of these things. I recolored the whole park 3 or 4 times over as far as landscaping goes, but I had a really kind of dense, tight package of landscaping, and this is really the first stuff that I did and wanted to carry a lot of this through the whole thing, where it was less trees and more dense bushes, things like that. But as the object limit loomed, it really didn't make a whole lot of sense, and it became harder and harder to make that happen. So we do end up with a lot of the jungle bushes that kind of hang off the end, which I think those things went okay, but for the most part, it ended up becoming a little bit harder to deal with. There's a couple of just hidden shops and things like that, so all the vending machines have a hidden shop underneath of them. If I remember right, this one here, let me see, mid-level vending 2, I think it was. Yeah, has been open since the park started construction and sold 302,431 ice creams, which is pretty darn impressive, I think. I've just been letting it run the whole time. We also have the people here who are looking out the binoculars here, which all this is just an invisible restroom, and you stack the restroom in there so the guests go in and then they stand there for a minute and then they leave, so it looks like they're viewing out the binoculars. Same thing up here, although this one is rarely used because it's a lot harder for the guests to get up to, so that's a challenge for them to find. But there's lots of little tricks like that in order to get the whole thing just right. So our characters here, so this is based on one of the real characters as well, Yoki Yamaguchi, and just a number of the restaurants and things like that. But thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm proud of it. It definitely was one of those kind of turned into a more labor of love as far as just the overall park aesthetics came and just the overall development of the park, and it really ended up being a fun project to develop out and really turn into something that I could be proud of. And I'm not sure if I'm ever going to get to a park again that feels the same way this one felt, but I'm going to try. So we'll see where it lands from there. But there's just a lot of kind of nice details and kind of built-in things, and a lot of these the object challenges that we had was just each of these buildings is fully built in all sides, and I had to go back through and just remove some of the details that you were never going to see from any angle because it just was useless to me and I could use that somewhere else. So I do wish that if I had more time, I would have, or not even more time, but if I had been thinking a little more, I would have built out the park slightly differently, because the park expands to the upper right and the upper left, and not down here. What I would really have loved more than anything else is another 20 or 30 squares this way for one thing here, and also be able to get this bridge out to the point where I can get the first of the big towers and bring the cables down. So the way that I set this up, because I thought that it would look a little weird with cables just coming up into sort of nowhere if I didn't have a tower, so I set it up that it had just basically a truss bridge out to a certain pier that would have been maybe right out here perhaps, but unfortunately there wasn't enough space to put a tower in that would make sense. So instead we ended up with cables, or no cables in there, but really wishing I had some space for the whole thing. I had a lot of custom objects made for this ride, and I really do appreciate everybody who had helped out with that. So Josh made these light poles for me, and MK98 made a bunch of the road signs. So all these triangular road signs here and everything. This is actually the way that Japan does their crosswalks, with 2 diamonds beforehand, and then there's a stop bar in the front. So we've copied that through the whole thing as far as that goes. Here you can see a couple of guests waiting for the Shimatsui Loop, line 51, which is the real bus loop that does feed the real park. And it has a couple of stops here. Now these two have kind of caught up with each other, which is a little bit frustrating. They're supposed to be spread around. There's only, I think, 3 buses in total that I've got throughout the whole space. No, 2 buses. So this is just these 2. But they stop here, they stop here, and then they also stop, I want to say up here somewhere. There's a couple of different bus stops throughout the whole space, and they do pick up people. So that's another way for the guests to get out of the town, is to actually get on the bus and take it to the park. So another way to limit the guests walking through the space down here, but not up top. But I think that's pretty much everything. Did anybody have any questions or about park development or anything like that? Because it's you know, it's getting fuzzier now, since it's been a good year and a little bit since I released it. So I had planned to do this video right afterwards, but that didn't end up happening. Shout out to Robbie92 also for his Ferris wheel in Tubaya Action Park, which I very shamelessly ripped off here in this case. The real Ferris wheel here, the giant scenic wheel, is 100 meters tall and was absolutely terrifying when we rode it. It feels every bit as tall, and it is rusted, and it just didn't look safe. And it was one of those things that I kind of got goaded onto by some other friends and just would not do again. I didn't mention here the TV tower here, the OHK. OHK is the local Okayama broadcast network. So this TV mast is just something that I brought into the park as sort of a nod to the local TV station that was in the area. The real park does not have that. Yeah. So I'll provide a download for this for everybody who's working on YouTube, but you know, it's coming well as far as that goes. Do I have any big plans for a new project? So right now, the new project I'm working on is what I'm building on stream for the Coaster Academy, and that's kind of taking up all my time. But I am working with a few folks on a potential collaborative effort that touches on another one of my interests. But that's as much info as I'm going to give there just now, because we're not very far along, and I want to make sure it's actually going to become a thing before I advertise it and try and generate some hype. But there's always projects in the back of my head. Granted, the time that's available for me to do those projects seems to get ever limited as time goes along, but there's quite a few projects that I would love to do here at some point. And unfortunately, none of them are small, and I don't think I've ever built small. I've always liked my larger projects, so it's maybe going to be a challenge here for all of that. But nonetheless, I mean, it's, even if this ends up being the last big park that I do, it's a good way to go out. But I hope it won't be. I do intend to keep going for as long as I can, and keep cranking it out. The open RCT and the new save format and everything else has really kind of rejuvenated just everything in this game. And it's kind of, I always say, it's just amazing that a game from 2002 can still have the just the overall interest and community behind it that this one has. So I do hope that, you know, everybody else will continue to build and support the community. And you know, I know that not everybody will dive kind of headlong into a backstory and multi-page read-me storyline timeline like this, but I do recommend that if you're building a park, you really look into the overall design behind it, the thought behind why things are where they are, and maybe some of the things that are causing the park to be like they are. Because I do think whether you actually put that in a narrative or not, it really does kind of inform your overall design. It makes the design feel stronger as a whole, because you thought through those things, whether they've been put forward for people to consume or not. So highly recommended as far as that kind of thing goes. But I think we'll call it there for the day. Thanks, Basecase, for the follow there. But hopefully you enjoyed this review, and I'll post it here on YouTube in just a little bit for everybody else as well. And I will hopefully have some more of these kind of things in the future as we finish parks. But yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. I appreciate you coming into here and just listening to the park. And we will talk to you next time. See you later now. Bye now.